Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Today I want to talk about two strange events that happened in Todmorden, England in 1980. Basically, they were tied together. The event started with the disappearance and then discovery of a body of a coal miner, and then it culminated with an incredible sighting of some strange, obviously extraterrestrial object by a police officer. And we're going to go through this. And this is a story you probably heard, I'm sure you've seen it in documentaries before. Basically, it's a story of basically Zigmund Adamski, a 56-year-old coal miner who disappeared in June of 1980 in Todmorden, England. And then also later on that same year by one of the investigating officers, Godfrey, a police officer who ended up seeing some strange diamond-shaped object on a road, and then he had some lost time, and so we're going to talk about all of this today and go through some of the. We're going to read some articles here about it and talk about it as we go through it. Anyway, here's the first article, which I will leave links for these articles so you can check them out for yourself. There are actually many articles on this topic. You can find them, but these are two of the better ones I found. One of them is from strangeoutdoors.com, and this was published on December 9th, 2020, and the headline is "The Mysterious Disappearance and Death of Zigmund Adamski, Murder or Alien Abduction." Okay, and the article reads, Zigmund Ziggy Adamski was a 56-year-old miner who went missing in mysterious circumstances from his home on Hornfield Crescent, Tingley, Yorkshire, in the United Kingdom in June 1980. His body was found a few days later some way from his home with a mysterious green substance on his neck that could not be identified despite a thorough investigation by British forensic and pathology experts. It was to be an unusually strange case, with some theorizing alien abduction or kidnapping, and 40 years on, it remains unsolved. The coroner running the inquest into the death said that the case was the biggest mystery of his career. Zigmund, or Ziggy, had gone out to walk to the local shops to do some shopping on Friday, June 6, 1980 at around 3:30 p.m. and was never seen alive again. Ziggy worked at the nearby Lofthouse Colliery and was originally born in Poland. Like many of his fellow countrymen, he had settled in England, having been forced to flee his native country after World War II. He set up home in the West Yorkshire village of Tingley, became a coal miner, and in 1951 married Leocadia, or Lottie. When she became so ill that she was confined to a wheelchair, Zigmund needed to spend more time with her. His own health too was suffering, and he had been off work for several months, suffering from a lung deformity which often made breathing difficult as a result of exposure to coal dust. He had decided to apply for early retirement, but this was initially rejected by the owners of the coal mine, but this decision was overturned on appeal. Unfortunately, the reversed decision arrived in the post the day after he disappeared. His wife, Lottie's initial suspicion was that he had been kidnapped, and by Zigmund's colleagues at the coal mine, His wife's, Lottie's, initial suspicion was that he had been kidnapped, and Zigmund's colleagues at the coal mine considered his disappearance a complete mystery. Now, so, I mean, it looks suspicious. Okay, now this guy, you have to look at the situation here. He's applying for benefits. He wants to retire early because he's sick from breathing coal dust. I mean, there's a lot of people in Pennsylvania that that have this problem, in years past, and still in years and today too, where you get black lung and it just basically you're done, and it's just a matter of time. And I'm assuming that this was apparently something that this guy was suffering with, but he tried to get benefits. The coal company fought back against him, but apparently he won the case. So I guess you could say that it's mysterious in a way. I mean, you could say that, well, did somebody at the coal mine do this? Maybe they didn't want him to get benefits, but I have trouble believing that because, I mean, there's a lot of people that do this and they don't get kidnapped and killed. So I would, and I'm sure that the police investigated all angles once his body turned up. But anyway, continuing with this article, it says 5 days after he disappeared on June 11th, 1980, coal yard worker Trevor Parker found his body on top of a 10-foot high pile of coal at his father's coal yard in Todmorden, around 20 miles away from Tingley. He was wearing a suit, but his shirt, watch, and wallet were missing. On the back of his head, neck, and shoulders were mysterious burns. His clothes were said to be improperly fastened. Ziggy's hair had also been cropped short in a roughly cut manner. So I just want to stop there. So basically, it looked like somebody cut his hair, maybe. His kidnappers maybe cut his hair for some reason. Very weird, but anyway, continuing. It says, strangely, there was no coal dust on his body or clothes, which would be expected, especially as it had been raining and if he had scrambled onto the coal himself. So, I mean, it's just stopping there again. So basically, you know, he's laying on top of a coal pile, but yet there's really no coal dust on his clothes. Now, I could tell you, if you're playing around in coal for any short period of time, you're going to get dirty, real dirty. I mean, where I grew up here in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of coal banks, and when we were kids, if you jumped in that stuff, you're going to be filthy, black, dirty. I mean, so that is strange. Continuing here, it says, it was like he had been placed there by someone or something. So basically, it seemed like he was placed on top of the coal bank, which is very strange. James Turnbull, the coroner running the inquest into Adamski's death, told the BBC in 2003 that the case was the biggest mystery of his career. He was baffled because although Zigmund had been missing for 5 days, he only had 1 day's growth of beard. He said, the question of where he was before he died and what led to his death just could not be answered. Turnbull also said a strange ointment that appeared to have been used on Zigmund's burns could not be identified by forensic scientists. Exhaustive checks failed to reveal any record of him having been treated at any hospital during his missing 5 days. The coroner recorded an open verdict, ruling that Adamski had died of a heart attack. But many were thinking, what caused the heart attack in the first place, and how did he end up on a coal pile in Todmorden, 20 miles from his home, after an apparent shopping spree? Well, that is very strange. So you got to stop and wonder, like, what? I mean, okay, now say, okay, he's on foot. He leaves his house on foot. He's going to stop at some local shops, but then he ends up 20 miles away in a different village, Todmorden, on top of a coal bank, and he's dead from an apparent heart attack. You know, that's very strange. I mean, there's an ointment. It looks like he has burn marks on him, and yet there's somebody put an ointment on to treat the burns. I mean, this is really weird. Now, this is why some people actually put out there the idea that maybe he was abducted by aliens, because how did he end up on the coal bank? He's not dirty. He was missing some clothes. It looked like somebody dressed him again, and did he have, like, I guess some of the ideas of some people at the time was maybe he saw. He came in contact with aliens, and he was scared to death. Maybe that's one of the ideas that ran through people's heads, including a local police officer named Godfrey. Anyway, continuing with this article, it says some speculated that Ziggy had been abducted by someone and killed for reasons unknown. Others believed he had been taken by aliens and his body dumped on the top of the coal pile after extraterrestrials had experimented on his body. Others put forward theories that he had been killed by the Soviet Union's KGB or had been left dazed and confused after being struck by ball lightning or some other unidentified phenomenon. Well, you know what I have to say to the ball lightning one? Woo! I mean, how could, I mean, what, I mean, it's always, so, I mean, now come on, ball lightning, the guy's going to end up on top of a coal pile after getting struck by ball lightning. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And this KGB sounds really far-fetched, too. I mean, why would the KGB be so interested in some guy, some old 56-year-old miner living in London, in England in 1980 to come in and kill him? That's ridiculous. They're absurd theories. Now, the idea that somebody might have kidnapped him, yeah, I think that's possible. I mean, for whatever reason, who knows? And maybe for whatever reason they were torturing him for a few days. I don't know. But we'll continue with the story here. It says the alien abduction theories were given a boost by Godfrey, the policeman who had been called to the Todmorden coal yard when the body had been found. In November 1985, months after the Adamski incident, Constable Godfrey had his own encounter with a UFO less than a mile away from the coal yard. We'll get into that later here. I'm going to skip forward here a little bit. Godfrey doesn't believe Adamski was murdered, although he said a more senior police colleague in 1980 believed he had been killed and believes that he didn't die where he was found, but had been placed there by someone or something, adding, he was on top of the coal pile on his back with not a bit of coal on him. His eyes were wide open and he had burn marks. Why would he climb up a stack of coal? There was some ointment on the back of his neck. Samples were sent to a home office laboratory which couldn't identify it. And that's really strange too now. So the guy's missing for 5 days. We know one of the other strange things about this was that it looked like he was fresh, like he was gone for 5 days, but he only had a day's shadow. If you don't shave, for after 5 days, you're going to have a pretty visible growth on your face, but apparently it looked like he only had about a day's worth of facial hair on his face. So that's another strange thing. That could be that he maybe he was kidnapped by some people, kept somewhere for a few days, and maybe they were torturing him. Maybe that explains the ointment, and just for some reason they were unable to determine what that ointment was. That doesn't mean it could have came from extraterrestrials. And again, of course, as you know, I do believe in extraterrestrials. I've encountered them, right? But that doesn't mean that that's what happened in this case. It's possible that it did, right? I'm not saying it didn't, but it's also possible that this guy was just simply killed. But what makes this interesting is the fact that you had this Godfrey making a statement that it might have been extraterrestrials, and then, of course, months later, he has his own extraterrestrial encounter, which is that coincidence, or what is it? I mean, so that's why this whole thing is very mysterious. But anyway, continuing with this article. It says, Parker and Godfrey said they would never forget the look on Adamski's face. Those eyes were staring up at me. I was looking down on him from a foot away. Those eyes sent a shudder down my spine. They were wide open. He had a look of someone who had seen something or someone that had scared him to death. Now, of course, this guy was sick, so maybe something scared him to death. Or it's like, say again, where did these strange burn marks come? He had burn marks on him. He had a strange ointment on him. Again, it could be that somebody had kidnapped him for some reason, right? Some maniac, perhaps. And I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't understand why. I mean, who knows why people do bad things? But it's possible. It's possible. Continuing, it says, Godfrey said, "I wish I'd never seen." He's talking about his own UFO experience here. We're going to skip that until later here. I don't want to confuse this whole thing. But anyway, Godfrey is in no doubt of a paranormal presence. He says in the past 20 years, there have been many claimed sightings in the Pennine Hills around Todmorden. So basically this Todmorden area in England is a hot spot for UFOs. Apparently a lot of people see these things out there. So I guess that's another reason why people believe it's possible that this Ziggy Adamski was kidnapped and died while in the custody of aliens during an abduction event. I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons. It's regarded as Britain's UFO hotspot, but serious UFO watchers dismiss most of these Pennine sightings as just lights in the sky. Neil Beecham, who in 1980 was a reporter on the Morley Observer, said, Mr. Adamski's mysterious disappearance 37 years ago has always troubled me and is a topic of conversation for the tight-knit community of Tingley, even to this day. Some amateur sleuths have suggested that Ziggy may have been abducted by family members and held against his will. In 2008, two British UFO investigators looked again at the case. According to reports, they discovered that at the time he disappeared, Adamski was in the midst of a feud with a family member who was having marital problems and had moved in with the Adamski couple. They believed that Adamski's disappearance may have been an abduction linked to the feud. However, Godfrey said we had no reason to suspect any members of the family. The coroner, James Turnbull, also told the BBC that he wasn't convinced by any of the theories relating to paranormal activity. The question of where he was before he died and what led to his death just could not be answered. That was what the coroner, Turnbull, said. So that's that story. So what happened here with this guy? It's very strange, okay, there's a strange ointment on him, but I think, life, it's, some things could happen that are really unexplainable and strange sometimes, but it doesn't mean that everything has you could point to extraterrestrials. It very possibly could be that this guy was abducted by aliens, and he could have possibly, maybe he did have a heart attack or something because of during that abduction. I mean, you would think it could be something that would scare anybody to death. I mean, I would be scared if I saw one walking in the door right now. I might take a heart attack. I might have a heart attack. So it's possible. And the strange events surrounding his death, it's who knows? I mean, if you look at the extraterrestrial explanation, you could say, well, okay, the guy goes out, he's, walking down a street to some local shops. He ends up 20 miles, he disappears 5 days later. He's laying on top of a coal bank. He's missing a shirt, his wallet's gone. And, so you would think, okay, that's maybe somebody robbed him, right? But at the same time, he had strange burn marks on him, and there was an ointment covering the burn marks. I mean, so there's just so much going on here. But then, you think about like how life just plays out sometimes. You walk out your front door, you don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes the strangest things could happen, right? I just a couple of months ago, I drove to a convenience store, right? And I'm walking into this convenience store, and there was a woman walking out. She was older and she was having trouble walking. I held the door for her, right? While she walked out, she thanked me a lot, right? So when I go in the convenience store and I'm buying a couple of things, next thing you know, this lady comes walking back in again. And she locked her keys in her trunk, and her phone was stuck in the car, and she needed to contact. She had an appointment. She was supposed to take her nephew to, I had this big story, right? She had to take her nephew to some appointment, and she was going to be late, and she needed to call him up. So I had to lend her my phone, and she had to call up a keysmith, someone to open the car for her. I mean, it was all this trouble. So I ended up sitting on a bench with this lady for 2 hours. I never expected that to happen, right? Because she needed a means to contact people, so I gave her my cell phone, so she was able to contact people. And I felt like I was doing. This person was in need, so I did a favor for her. But I never expected that to happen. There are things that happen on a regular basis where you just don't expect it. Just like for instance, if you ever watched the movie Pulp Fiction, there's all these things, right, that happen in that movie. Especially the first time you watch it, you just don't know where anything's going, and then when you see it, I mean, it's just incredible. How things, life is just so strange, and it could lead you down all these different avenues that you just never saw coming. You never see it coming sometimes. So who knows? I mean, it could be, instead of extraterrestrial, it could have been, some punk just, wanted to steal this guy's wallet, or maybe he was holding him prisoner for a few days, and then, the guy died from a heart attack out of fright, because maybe, who knows, right? And then they put him on top of a coal bank. But then again, it could have been aliens. There's no answer. We just don't know. We just don't know. Like a lot of people say it's extraterrestrial. I think that's a possibility, but who knows? We don't have enough. There's just not enough to go on for that. However, what's strange about this whole thing, right, is the fact that you had Godfrey at the time, saying that, hey, it could have been extraterrestrials, right? Because it's strange. What makes it so strange is that 5 months later, he had his own strange encounter, an encounter which basically turned his life upside down. Well, here's an article from history.com .uk, and of course I will leave the link for this so you can check it out for yourself. And I'm going to read some of this article. It says, on the 6th of June 1980, 56-year-old coal miner Zigmund Adamski left his home in Tingley, West Yorkshire, to do some shopping. He never returned. On the 9th of June, his body was found on top of a 10-foot high pile of coal in the town of Todmorden, 20 miles away from his house. Sent to investigate, local Bobby Alan Godfrey discovered that while Adamski was wearing a suit, his shirt, wallet, and watch were missing. And of course, we just went through all of this. The coroner Turnbull confirmed that there were these strange burns on them. They were treated by a strange ointment that could not be identified. And speaking to reporters at the time, Godfrey said there was a possibility that Adamski had been abducted by aliens. I am open-minded, he said. I can't rule it out. He might have been right. We don't know. We're never going to I don't think we're ever going to get to the mystery of what happened to Ziggy Adamski. I don't think we're ever going to know what really happened here. It's just the events surrounding, his disappearance and death are just... There's just too many holes. There's too much mystery. The cops were never able to, figure out what the heck happened to this guy, and it's really a shame. It's really a shame. But anyway, continuing with this article, it says the true cause of the Loft House colliery worker's death remains a mystery to this day. One wild theory that did the rounds at the time was that Adamski had been killed by the KGB, which I think is ridiculous. Another suggested he had been struck by ball lightning, which caused him to wander off confused and eventually die at the top of the coal heap. I think that's ridiculous too. I mean, again, the ball lightning excuse theory is ridiculous, because I mean, his clothes, if he was in a daze climbing up to this really high pile of coal, he would have been filthy dirty, and he wasn't. So that I think that's not what it was. I mean, he could have been carried up there by thugs, perhaps, and dumped there, right? That's possible, I guess. I mean, or he could have been dumped there from a UFO. That's possible, I guess. You know why it's possible? Because there's a such thing as extraterrestrials in here on this planet. I know. I've seen one of the craft, and I encountered one of the beings, so I know that. And so millions of other people, I'm sure, tens of thousands at least, probably in the millions. But anyway, continuing. To many people, though, there was only one explanation. Adamski encountered alien beings on his way to the shops, and it had cost him his life. 5 months after the grisly discovery of Adamski's body, Todmorden once again found itself at the center of media attention. This time, it was none other than Godfrey, who was in the eye of the storm. Sent out at 5 in the morning to deal with a call about escaped cattle on a housing estate, Godfrey was, according to his own account, stopped dead in his tracks by what he claimed was an unidentified flying object. Godfrey said the object was a bright light in the sky, a rotating diamond-shaped vessel 20 feet high and 14 feet wide. Godfrey made a quick sketch of the object in his notebook and then grabbed his police radio to call the incident in. The line was dead. Suddenly, it disappeared in a bright flash, and Godfrey found himself sitting in his car 30 yards further down the road. Looking at his watch, the policeman was surprised to see it was 25 minutes later than it had been just moments before. Weirder still, his boot was split open and an itchy mark had appeared on one of his feet. Well, let me just stop there for a second. It's obvious that this guy, he has missing time. He was looking at something that was basically a craft that was made by non-human beings. I mean, these were obviously alien beings that he encountered. There's no question, and he lost time, obviously. And the fact that his boot was sliced open, right? The fact that he had some mark on his foot or whatever, all of that stuff. That I mean, it's clear. It's very clear what happened here. This guy was actually, he came upon an extraterrestrial craft. And the beings in that craft took him on board. Anyway, continuing. Baffled, Godfrey returned to where he had seen the light and discovered the road where his car had been was completely dry, despite the fact it had recently been raining. Getting out to investigate the area, he found the cows he'd been looking for in a park next to the road. They had not been there before he saw the strange object in the sky. What on earth was going on? That's another strange thing about this case, was the appearance of the cows. Apparently somebody called in these cows, or and then all of a sudden they were like all huddled in this one little area side the road. They weren't there just when he first showed up, and all of a sudden they were there. That was another weird aspect of this whole incident with Godfrey. The fact that the cows all of a sudden were there when they weren't there, a minute before. And these kind of things happen actually with cows. I mean, there's been stories out at Skinwalker Ranch, where a cow will mysteriously disappear. Or there was that story at Skinwalker Ranch where all of a sudden a whole bunch of cows were placed inside this building somehow, and it would have been impossible to do. I mean, there's just so many crazy stories with cattle and UFOs. Of course, cattle mutilations is one of the main things that seem to happen when these things are around. But yeah, there's a lot of strange stories with cattle and UFOs. But continuing here. Getting out to investigate the area, he found the cows he'd been looking for in a park next to the road. They had not been there before he saw the strange object in the sky. When he finally managed to report his strange encounter, Godfrey was met with skepticism and even ridicule. On the advice of a solicitor friend, he decided to see a hypnotist to get to the bottom of what he'd witnessed. Under hypnosis, Godfrey recalled that he had been blinded by the light and passed out. He told the hypnotist that when he awoke, he was in a strange room being examined by several little creatures and a tall humanoid figure with a beard. Again, his claims were met with raised eyebrows and derision. Several weeks after Godfrey's account had leaked to the newspapers and became an international news story, he was called into his inspector's office. There sat a man in a dark suit and tie who introduced himself as the man from the ministry. He had with him a file containing Godfrey's drawing of the strange craft. Godfrey wasn't allowed to see the rest of the file, but assumed it also contained his account of the evening's events, plus his report on the mysterious death of Zigmund Adamski. The man told Godfrey that he was to swear on the Official Secrets Act that he would not talk to anyone about what he had seen. Godfrey reluctantly agreed. The young policeman... No, let's just stop there for a second. I mean, again, this is another case of the government stepping in, some government officials stepping in and telling people to shut up. How many times do we hear this over the years, right? Over the years, there's so many cases where somebody sees something and then some government official shows up and tells them to shut up. I mean, I just talked about it in a recent podcast where, there was the teacher in 1966 Australia, the Westall school UFO incident where some people showed up at his house and told him, if you talk about this, then you're going to end up losing your job. That means you were drunk. Stuff like that. You get threatened. You get told to sign papers. Don't say anything about this. For what? I mean, again, it's a cover. They've been covering this up, for decades now, and this is another instance where somebody's basically threatened, to keep their trap shut about what they saw. They don't like it when there's officials like a police officer, even though the police officer is not a highly placed government official, they don't like it, especially someone like a police officer stepping forward and saying they encountered something like this, because then people are going to start, realizing, in fact, that there is an extraterrestrial presence here, that, in fact, there is something going on here. So they got to send out these kind of creeps to shut them up. And that's what obviously happened here. Just like usual. What else do you expect? Okay, continuing. It says, the young policeman then encountered the man on several occasions over the next few days. It was clear he was being followed. Eventually, Godfrey confronted the man in his local pub, telling them to clear off. The man disappeared and was never seen again. Who was this mysterious man? Was he an M15 agent or an MI5 agent sent to warn him off? That's what Godfrey believes, though another theory is that the stranger was actually from West Yorkshire Police, sent to warn Godfrey off from speaking to the press in an attempt to not draw any more attention to the force. They were already getting a considerable amount of bad publicity over the Yorkshire Ripper case. Despite that later transpiring that several other police officers had a bus driver had seen strange lights on the same morning, Godfrey's claims were seen as an embarrassment to the force. He was eventually transferred to Wakefield, and an attempt was even made to have him sectioned. Godfrey later claimed that he was hounded out of the police for refusing to give up on his story. He also talked of the negative impact the incident had on his family. And here's a direct quote that he had. He says, "I wish I'd never seen the UFO, particularly because of the effects on my children." He was later to reflect, "It's not easy having a policeman as a father, but when he's a policeman who saw a UFO, it's even worse." Since the two incidents in 1980, Todmorden and other areas of West Yorkshire have become UFO hotspots. Mysterious objects have been reported for 40 years across the pennies in the skies above Holmfirth, Rothwell, and in 2016 over the world-famous Ribble Head Viaduct, where strange lights could be seen hovering in the sky for several hours. These are all locations here in London near this Todmorden site. A mere year after Godfrey's experience, Todmorden local Vicky Dinsdale was out walking her dog with her grandfather when they saw a long, thin, diamond-shaped object that kept changing color. Vicky's grandfather, a former sergeant in the army, told the young girl to keep what they saw to themselves, mindful of the ridicule visited on Godfrey. So, is there an explanation for what happened to Ziggy Adamski and PC Godfrey, or indeed for the numerous incidents that have happened in the 4 decades since? Despite many people attempting to get to the bottom of this intriguing mystery, no one has ever managed to come up with a definitive answer. In the case of Adamski, the state of his clothes, his cropped hair, 1 day of beard growth, and the strange burns still baffle people to this day. Well, yeah, we don't know. I mean, we even as someone who could sit here and tell you with a straight face that there is an extraterrestrial presence on this planet. I mean, of course, I've seen one of these craft up close, so I know that they're here. And I encountered one of these beings that was definitely not human. Somehow came into my bedroom in 1977 when I was a kid. Right? I know for a fact that there's something here. For a fact. I mean, I know that. I'm a person who's going through life who knows for a fact, right? I'd like more information about it. That's why I'm doing this podcast, right? This is, I like calling out the government because they're a bunch of liars and they've been covering this up for decades. Actually, it's not just the government of the United States, right? It's as you can see, it's the government in the United Kingdom. It's governments all over the world. They're keeping this a secret, right? There was obviously some sort of some sort of an agreement in place, to keep this a secret, to keep the people in order, right? For some reason, for whatever reason, and it's disgusting, and I'm sick of it. But yeah, you can see that there's something here. But yeah, this is another case where you have, but as far as the Adamski cases, I'm getting off track here. With the Adamski case, right, we just don't know. I mean, if we're being truthful, right, we don't know. I mean, he could have been murdered by somebody. He could have been kept prisoner by some maniacs, right, or maniacs, and then he died while he was in there. Apparently, he died from a heart attack. Maybe they scared him to death. I mean, who knows what happened, right? Who knows what happened? We really don't know. But it could be extraterrestrial too. I just think we don't have enough evidence to really say. There's not enough evidence out there. It's never been solved. So it's possible, right? I do think that there's some people that do disappear. There's some permanent disappearances apparently every now and then where somebody's, disappears forever, right? I do think it's possible that there's some of these people were taken by extraterrestrials. There's been some human mutilation cases which are very similar to animal mutilation, cattle mutilation cases, right? Where apparently it's very possible that aliens are involved. I do believe that these things happen, but we just don't have enough evidence with this Adamski case. However, I do believe completely that what happened to Godfrey was extraterrestrial. There's no doubt about it. And his statements, early on, saying that he thinks it's possible that Adamski was taken by extraterrestrials and he died of a heart attack because of fright. I mean, yeah, it's a coincidence but maybe there's more to that too. Who knows? Maybe his statement, here's the thing. These aliens could be paying more attention to us than we really know, right? Maybe he was, maybe he had his encounter because of the statements he made publicly about the Adamski disappearance, and the aliens didn't like that for some reason. Who knows? I mean, there's all kinds of different theories we can get into here. I mean, there's a rabbit hole you could fall down here with this one because there's a lot of mystery to this entire case. But I think what happened with Godfrey, there's no question this guy encountered extraterrestrials. There's no question. The sudden appearance of the cows. I mean, how did that happen, right? His missing time, and he got hypnotized. Now, the other interesting thing about this guy is that, and I think it does. I might get into in this article here. Well, he was hypnotized and he remembered these beings and stuff. But then later on he says, no, I think it might have been a dream. Like he has trouble admitting that part. I don't think it was a dream. I think there could be a couple of reasons why he's saying now that it's a dream. I think he doesn't. I mean, for a regular person to say these things publicly, they're afraid of the stigma. They don't want to, they don't want people to think they're crazy or anything. It could be something to do with that, right? But anyway, let's continue with the article here. As for Godfrey's account, we just have his word to go on. Well, not really. I mean, I don't think it's not just his word. I mean, he did. There was the mysterious dry spot. It was raining out, but the area where that diamond-shaped object was, it was dry, right? There was the weird, strange appearance of the cattle. So no, it wasn't just his word. He had a little bit of evidence to go along with his word there. Continuing here, it says, but if he's simply making it up, it's been to his own personal detriment, as he lost both his job and a lot of credibility, becoming a figure of ridicule to many. He also lost his family and his home and slid into alcoholism. Despite all this, he still swears that something out of the ordinary happened to him that night. Plus, there's the small matter that he wasn't the only one who reported strange goings-on that morning. See, that's another thing. In addition to the some of the evidence, the trace evidence, the fact that the road was dry when it was raining, the fact that the cattle showed up, there were other people seeing strange objects, flying around. So there was other evidence there to go along with his claim. And here's a quote from him from 2014. He said, This was a nuts and bolts craft, not a trick of the mind. I have never seen anything like it. I would swear on the Bible it was from somewhere else. These things have been seen so many times above Todmorden. They call the area the UFO alley. So, I mean, yeah. Okay, continuing here. Did aliens have something to do with the death of a 56-year-old minor and ruin the life of a young police officer in a small Yorkshire market in 1980? The answer is we'll probably never know for sure. I could say this. I don't think we'll ever know for sure with regard to Adamski, but I think we pretty much know for sure with regard to Godfrey. He saw something. I mean, this guy, his life was turned upside down. His life was basically ruined over this, you know? He had to deal with a whole bunch of ridicule. I mean, this was 1980. I mean, people were making fun of this subject a lot back then. You know, from 1980, in the 1980s, 1990s. You know, again, the first thing my buddy said in 1994 after we saw a flying saucer, right, up close and personal, was, "I'm not." First words after it all happened, right, was, "I'm not telling anybody. I'm not saying anything," because everybody knows, you know, what the penalty is. The penalty for telling the truth, because this is how our governments have set this up. They set things up to make people look like morons or idiots for reporting these things, and that's terrible. That's a crime in itself that needs to be that people should be punished for. People in governments for doing this to people. Anyway, continuing. For skeptics, the idea of alien abduction is a load of nonsense. Well, the skeptics are idiots. I mean, for the most part, especially the debunkers, they're complete morons for the most part. Actually, for all parts, not for most part, for the entire part. Debunkers are morons for all of it. For those like the group who meet at the Golden Lion pub in Todmorden once a month to discuss these incidents as well as their own brushes with UFOs, things aren't quite so black and white. So I guess there's some kind of a group that was meeting, in that area, in that town there, to talk about these kind of things. But anyway, yeah. So that's where we are with this. It's just another case of, reality staring you right in the face. I mean, with regard to Alan Godfrey, he obviously had this encounter. Now, he was hypnotized. He said he remembered these weird short beings. In fact, one of the first documentaries, I think it was a documentary I saw in the early 90s. I have not seen it since. There was a documentary that used to be on TV all the time, and at that time, in that documentary, he was not denying, like he wasn't saying at the time that he thought that his memories recovered while under hypnosis was a dream. Not in that documentary anyway, and that was around in early 90s, but so that's like 30 years ago now. Unbelievable. That's how time is flying. But I guess at some point he starts saying he wasn't sure it was he was thinking, well, maybe that stuff under hypnosis was a dream, because after the incident happened, he started reading a lot of books about UFOs and aliens, and he thinks that it's possible that maybe that stuff muddied the waters a little bit for him, and maybe he because of reading those books, maybe he dreamt that stuff up during his hypnotic regression session. However, I don't think he did. I think what he remembered during that hypnosis was what happened to him. I mean, obviously he was missing time. Obviously, what happened? Something happened to him, right? Obviously, we've heard reports of these kind of beings before, what they look like. Some of them look like the short beings that he saw look like the grays, so. Yeah, I think that's what happened to him. I think he was even though he has trouble, with it right now. There's a lot of people like that, actually. There's one of the 4 people in the Allagash 4 mystery. Now, he's not sure. All these 4 guys saw a UFO, and they had missing time in 1976, 75, 76 in the Allagash wilderness on the east coast of, I believe it's in Maine. And they all had missing time. They didn't really start realizing this until over 10 years later, right? They all went under hypnosis, and they all recalled pretty much the same thing, that that they were abducted by aliens and they were brought on board. One of the guys went on to later on said he's not sure, it might have been a dream. He has trouble believing it. Even when you recover these memories under hypnosis, it's just so fantastic. For the person that it happens to, it's hard to believe. And I think that could partly be responsible for why Godfrey says that now, that it could have been a dream, and it could be that he just doesn't want to admit it because of this whole thing basically ruined his life. I mean, it's one thing seeing a UFO, right? That's one thing. But then to tell the world that, yeah, these beings took me on board. I was abducted by aliens. That's a whole nother level then. You know, and a lot of people just, you know, will make fun of that. The mainstream media will make fun of that. They laugh about it all the time. They're laughing at it about right now, ever since, you know, we just talked about this in the last podcast. I mean, you see them all over TV laughing about it. They bring Neil deGrasse Tyson on the news. They're all laughing about it, all chuckling about aliens and how people are stupid, basically. You see, Stephen Colbert laughing about it on his show, making fun of aliens. It's always a joke in the mainstream, right? The mainstream news makes a joke out of it. The Pentagon, they tell you whatever the Pentagon says is that's what happened. They never do any kind of investigation. It's all a big joke. That's what's going on here. And so I could understand why he would want to not talk about this publicly. It makes perfect sense why he would say, yeah, I think that was a dream. Yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, he probably doesn't want to admit it anymore. Why should he? Look what this whole thing has done to his life. So it all makes sense. Anyway, until next time.